Hi everyone. In this demo, I'm going to do a spontaneous watercolor, 100% paint as we go. No drawing, no reference, no anything. We're just going to use the old bean and try and do the best we can. Now what we're going to do is mainly rely on our tilt up and down, and then also just let the color mix, and we're going to add colors on top of each other and let them mix together. I like to mix my colors pure, so I get three variations of colors. One pure color, another pure color, and then the color I get when they both mix. I don't mind seeing all three colors. This way, it adds a classic watercolor look to it where you could see colors mixing instead of just constantly using muted colors anywhere I go. I'm going to try and do a landscape that's going to have some dead trees in it, some brush. We'll call it late spring and early summer, only because that is a very interesting time of the year. You have a lot of quinacridone gold, burnt sienna, Van Dyke brown, or burnt umber, your pick, of dead brush from the winter. But you also have a lot of very vibrant purples, magentas, of new buds coming out on very specific trees. Now, what I like to do is a lot of research for all my paintings, and if I have a pure grove of silver maple or mountain maple trees, then I know at that time of year they should have a very hard haze of maroon, purple, magenta, whatever you want to call it. But this will definitely tell you the time of year and different things that are going on within the painting that little hints of your drawing can tell you. Now again, as I always say, whatever type of style and whatever subject you paint, that's important to you. This way you could add as much information or as little as you want to. But for this one, we're just going to paint as we go, and this will also be my entry to the Escape Motions challenge, and I'm going to put it in under the summer fun, I think it is. But for that reason, we're going to do this one a little bit different than what I normally do. I do a lot of research, a lot of planning for every painting I do for myself. The demos, I try to include other things that I may not normally do myself, but they're for your benefit, just as options of what you could pick up depending on how you could apply it to another painting, or even give you options as to what you're painting at the time. Let's go ahead and get started and see how this turns out. Okay, going over the visual settings, we're just going to have everything straight up 5s for now. I don't want any drips, so I'm going to turn that off. We'll close that down. And then we're going to leave the tilt on and slow it down just a little bit right there. But what we are going to do is we're going to turn the diffusion off right here. Pause diffusion. We're going to turn off the diffusion. And we're going to lay all our colors down at once and then start the diffusion so all the colors mix together evenly. So in other words, some you may be just putting some down, and others you may be getting really close that you either already left them go too long or you'd have to keep on fast drying. This way we'll let everything mix all at once. Now let's start with our burnt sienna, and we'll leave it right there. Now what I'm going to do is just create some treetops here, and brush, low brush, and then I'm going to put a little bit of color in them so then it'll start mixing as we go. And then say, for example, I'm going to try a little bit different colors. And we're just trying to create shapes that we could go with and pretty much work on from there. And then we'll redefine them further once we see our shapes after the water does its thing. And I'm just putting different colors down, different places, and just to leave them go. Let's put a little bit of burnt sienna down and purples again over here. We'll take these trees off the paper over here. And then just to mix things up, I'm going to put in some new colors of maybe some foreground vegetation. Now these tops that are all dark here, they're going to drain down and they're going to be lighter on top. So what we end up with is not what we see now.
Let's put even a little bit of cobalt blue in that one. And just to touch it down, and it'll all mix together nicely. And then I'm going to go back to burnt sienna and our permanent magenta. Work well together. And then this is just a preliminary wash, so this is just very little of what we're going to end up with, but we're doing this in real time, so please bear with me. And then we're going to do that. Let's go there. Well, let's put a little wee bit of cobalt blue in this one. There's maybe some pulled out shadowed areas. Okay, that's it. Now we're going to go with this for now. But then what we'll do is we'll turn on the diffusion and let the water do its thing. And what will happen is all the colors are going to start running down because of how I have the tilt. Then you can see now how all of our edges are already starting. And then what we could do now is, and the tops of them are starting to lighten up. Let's stop it right there because we already got some nice hard edges. And then these colors mixed real nice and subtly. And then this is just one layer of many that now we could go back in and redefine them. But what we want to do is leave this the way it is. We could go back and define any of these shapes further or create even more shapes in front of them or behind them with masks or other dark layers behind them. But what we don't want to do is to disrupt some of the really nice color patterns and color mixing that we already have. Now that was just done that quick. And again, just as a refresher, all of these brushes, or I should say at least most of them, I don't know if I added any more since the last demo, but they are all available on the free assets page of Escape Motions. Now we're going to let that just like that, and then what we will do is start a new layer. Okay, next we're going to fill in these white areas here, but what we're going to do is leave everything, as I said, here so we don't interrupt it. But then what we're going to do is build a layer behind this one and fill in that color a little bit. And I'm going to move this layer down below this one. So now this is the bottom layer and it'll be in behind this. But we're going to just kill some of this white, so to speak. And we're going to do that right now the same way. But I'm going to turn this down just a little bit so they're not as dramatic. And I'm also going to cut the opacity down. So we're just doing a little wee bit at a time. And then we could fill these in. We'll start with our cobalt violet. And again, remember, this is behind what we already painted. And it's also a dry layer, so it's going to react also the same way, making edges, like right in there, right in here. And then we'll leave them go, and then we'll stop them when we see some interesting things happening. You just do this a little bit at a time. If you don't think you want to watch too many things at once, just work on smaller areas. That is always the easiest way to do any kind of watercolors. Let's go with the purple over here, and then I'm going to let that go. And see, we'll get some shapes here, and these will be just redefining the shapes we already got. But what we're doing is just filling in the spaces. Let those go. I'm going to go with my Potter's Pink. Just let that create some shapes within this white shape. And we'll leave our edges there. And then again, remember, we can always go back over any of this with a mask and lighten or darken some areas up. We'll be darkening some areas up if we indirectly lighten other areas up. This, we're going to put our quinacridone gold down. I'm going to make some spots in here, let it run down. Now this is dark up here, but this is going to drain down, so we'll get our shape back again. That's right in here. We're going to make it a little wee bit smaller just so we don't cover everything up. We can leave some whites behind, and we can always go back and darken things up. But remember, this is traditional watercolors in a digital form. So we are going to always make things darker, but not necessarily, with the exception of a mask, be able to lighten up too much. But again, it's up to you. If it's worth saving a painting, by all means do it. There's some more edges there. And we're just slowly closing in. We'll get an edge right here now. And it'll be within this light spot of the previous paint we did. These blues look pretty good. And again, we'll be mixing all kind of different colors. go with our burnt sienna down in here a little bit. Let that run into the quinacridone gold. That's getting some more edges here and there. Okay, let's fast dry that where everything is now. A bit there. Stop. I like that right in here. Get a little bit of action going there. Let's go with the cobalt violet over here. Let that run down a little bit. Okay, now what we're going to do, let's actually add a little bit more quinacridone gold down here first. Let those make some edges there. Stop. And one more up here. Stop. And we keep on adding layer over layer over layer. That's what really gives us our complexity too. Just make everything look a lot more intricate than it really is. Let's put some other colors in that one. And that'll drain off so we keep our edge here. Okay, there's that. Okay. Now, let's go in. Now we're going to make a third layer, but we're going to do the exact opposite of what we did the first layer. Let's try that next. Okay, now what we're going to do is create another layer. I'll just leave it layer 3. And then we could actually, this one's going to be real light, and you'll see what I mean. These are going to be the distant trees, but we're going to do things a little wee bit different on this one. And we're going to invert the tilt about right there. So now what we're going to do is draw in some trees up in here, anywhere we want. We can make a distant tree line here, but instead of it going down, it's going to go up, and then it'll have a dark edge with a lighter front, or just even more or less like the body of the tree that we could then go back over and define further. But where we have dark over light here, now we'll have light over dark. So it'll be just the exact opposite of what we're trying to do. You'll see what I mean. And then we are going to start, let's start with just some lighter colors. Let's go with burnt sienna again. We're going to cut the opacity down as far as we can. And still, but let's try 5. Now, if I have it set up, so that means when I start doing some of these shapes, I'm going to keep drawing because it'll wait until I'm done. Then we're going to grab our purple quickly and then let it work its way up. And you can see what's happening already. We'll let that work just for a little bit, and these will be distant trees. Let me stop it right there. I'll fast dry that. And then now what I want to do, I'm going to actually dry that layer. And I'm going to create some more shapes within that. We'll verify, yes, it is dry. But now I'm just going to go back in and create some more shapes. Being it is dry paper again, it will stop just like that. And I will stop it there. Let's go with the quinacridone gold just a little bit here and there. Let that one create an edge for us. There's another edge. And this will be the exact opposite of what we got in front. But these could be the distant trees. We're going to give it a little wee bit more opacity. Again, being that I dried the paper completely, I'll start getting edges again. Stop it there. And then this could be just like real distant trees. But then if it's a little wee bit foggy on the bottom or just a hazy whatever, and you can see the treetops easier than the middle of the forest, it'll just make an interesting atmospheric perspective approach, so to speak. Let's go a little bit on the other side too. We'll stay with the burnt sienna. That's very subtle there. Put a little bit of blue in this one. And again, we're just letting the water do all the work. Stop it. Now let's stop it right there. And let's try some Cobalt violet. I'll take it off the edge of the paper. Let those go. This is obviously a stylized forest. Purple leaves. Okay, let's stop that there. Now, see, we have all kind of interesting things happening here. This is a tree here, but then it's real dark back in here, but then this is a top here. So you gotta, now what we have to do is we have to start picking out and defining our shapes even further. If we want this tree right here, let's do it this way. If we want this tree right in here to come in front of this tree right here, then what we would do is take this and carry this line down over and just make it a little wee bit darker and make it darker in here. So just start building up textures within his tree to make it look like it's in front of these. And then plus these will be lighter, so they'll be pushed back a little bit more into the distance. And then we're going to put some of the darker shapes up front, and then maybe even a little bit of grasses right here in front with just a little bit of brush. But then we'll make that real dark, and then we could use our mask over top of that dark to reveal the layers of color behind it. And again, I go over that in a pretty good depth of what all to do with the masking demo just a while back. Okay, let's leave these here, and let's start even refining some of these shapes even a little wee bit more, just a little bit darker. They're pretty light. And then we could do that a couple of different ways. We could add more, or we can even just duplicate that layer and make everything just the same so we don't lose anything, but it'll obviously be darker. Let's try that right now. So if I take this layer right here and duplicate it, which is right there, the bottom, now it added a little bit more texture, so that's not bad. Then we could even define some of these lighter areas here by actually then bringing some of these trees to the foreground, just like this one is, and then that way we could define our trees as we go, and then we're going to put trunks and branches and all those different things in to just make it more detailed and complete, so to speak. But let's leave that doubled, but then all we have to do is grab that one, and then we're going to merge those together, because keep in mind, if we decided that this one is now too dark and it's pushing itself forward a little bit too much, then we could just adjust the opacity of that layer with digital, of course. Let's redefine some of these shapes even more. Okay, you know what? Before we do anything else with this, we're going to take advantage of digital. And what I mean by that is we're going to select all three layers, and then I'm going to take this down and reduce every layer down in size to give us some more room. This right here tapering off into very light colors, I'd like to see that go off into the distance, but we need more room for that. So we could either make the paper bigger, or we'll just take this and make everything else reduced in size. So I'm going to go up to my transform tool, and because I have all three layers selected, I am going to cut back their size. I'm holding shift. You don't have to for this, obviously. That's only if you want to keep it in scale. But what I could do is I'll reduce it. In fact, I'll make it a little bit narrower. So I'm not holding the shift right now. Bring this down a little bit, and then we're going to move it over just a little wee bit more, just to give us some room. And then some of these trees in here, like this, how would you say, these trees right in here. And they look now tall and skinny, and some of them are a little bit more rounded, and they have different shapes to them, and that's what I wanted. Just to try and vary the types of trees, colors, shapes, short, fat, tall, skinny, you name it. Just some shorter ones, some taller ones. Basically, you get the idea. But what we're going to do now is just say, for example, if I click on this, and this is layer 2, I just want to show you one other quick tip. And that is this layer right here. But if I hit my Control and Shift, then I could select the layer I want to work on, which is this right here. And then that's actually number 3 layer, copy 1. Now what I'm going to do is just feather that hard edge that was at the edge of the paper out a little bit so I could blend some more trees back into it, take those off into the distance. Now we're going to use our Kleenex for that one, but we're going to just erase that because this is going to be a permanent change. And then our Kleenex, oh, it's already selected, so we're just going to go back and kind of lightly dust that off and just take it back to slow white paper. And then we can even take this one out right here, maybe too. We can even just, oh, that would be number 2. And we'll take that out just like that. We're going to just change some things since this is what would be considered. We're going to take that down too, and we're going to make that start to go down this way instead of back up again. That way we could change that. Now we could take this off into the distance and let that go. Then we'll make it just a real small grassy field right in here. But then we can leave that like that. And then, but this is just giving us the opportunity to change things around. And obviously, if you want to resize your layers, just select all layers that you're working on or need resized, and then all of them will be resized at the same time. Let's go with that now, and then we're going to adjust some of this over here right now. That would be that layer right there, and then I'm going to go back in, and we're going to have the tilt up a little bit. Start off with my Potter's Pink. I'll just start with the colors that are already there. And I'm going to have my finger on the F key for fast dry. Put a little bit of burnt sienna in there. That looks good. Stop that one right there. That one don't look too bad there. And then we'll make this one maybe even 2. There we go, give it some shape. And I'm going to go to different colors here. Back to the gold. Leave that one there. Okay, then we're going to put a little bit of gold back in behind this one. Just like that. Leave that one go. Okay. Not too bad. I'm going to dry that layer first. And then we'll go back in and make a little bit more smaller ones inside. Okay, we'll let those like that. And that's not bad. That kind of has these converging lines will take us off into that direction too. Okay, let's make some of these now darker. And again, now since I actually made that its own layer, I'm going to put the transparent lock on, and then we're just going to darken some of these up the way it is. And I'm going to first dry that layer just to start from the very beginning. I'm going to take transparent layer off, make sure everything's dry. There we go. And then now we'll put the transparent lock on, and we're going to go into some little bit darker colors here. And what they'll do is they'll stop at the edges. So if I even paint over, it won't be too bad. Okay, we'll stop that. And let's take the transparent lock off for this one. Good enough. Stop that one. Okay. And now let's go see. Now let's make some. We'll go back to this one. Hit Control Shift. Select that one. That's layer number 1. That would be it. Now let's make some top ones in here. Make it a little bit smaller. I'm going to try to make some smaller type branches. And then we're going to dry that. Okay. Make some in the foreground. Okay. We'll go with that for now. And just start refining my shapes until I'm ready to start putting in some branches, some tree trunks, what have you, and then the lower grasses and the grass fields, and then we'll see how we go. But some of this, since you have a rough idea what I'm doing, then I can even speed paint some of this. Let's get some of this done. Okay, because we're working spontaneous, I really like what's going on in this, taking the lighter colors off into the distance. So I'd like to even play that up more. But this time we're not going to change the proportions of our trees and shrubs. We're going to widen the paper. So let's do that right now. And what we will do is go to Edit and then Canvas Size. And then I am going to make this, let's go all the way out to 24. And then that way we could make it a full 12 by 24, a 1:2 panoramic. I'll hit OK. And then here's our new painting now. And I'm going to select all my layers. And then I'm going to go to the Move tool. And we're going to move all of them back over to here. And we can move it up or down a little bit just to change things if we needed to. But that's not bad right there. And what it'll do is it'll give us an opportunity to create much more sky over here, because we're going to do that too. I'll hit OK. And then now we got plenty of room to take this off, and then we can even take it down and then maybe even back up a little bit. Let's try that now. Okay, you have a rough idea what I'm doing now, whether the water and colors are either going up or going down. Now what I want to do is make the foreground even a little bit darker again now. Since we added some paper, I want to give myself some room to have these foreground trees much darker, and then that'll give me some room to make some lighter, just distant trees in the background. And we may add some few pines here and there, and then also some dead trees, which I'll show you how we could really do that in an interesting way with our tilt. Let's first get something done, and then we'll stop when we introduce a new item to the painting. Okay, let's start working in on some of the distant shrubs and trees, and I will actually make them lighter and less detailed as I take them back off into the distance. Putting in some distant pine trees now, these trees will always be the dark green year round. That is important to note because the trees and shrubs I'm actually painting would be considered a late spring or early summer painting. That is because all the vegetation through the winter dies off, and then you are left with a lot of burnt siennas, quinacridone golds, and Van Dyke browns. However, in early summer, late spring, a lot of trees and shrubs start to bud, and many different types of trees and shrubs have that bright, vivid purple, magenta buds on the new sprouting branches. Doing the clouds the same way I did the trees, to let the paint run down and define my edges of clouds, I'm just mixing in some burnt sienna and cobalt blue to give it that wintry look. Putting in some layers of grasses and base colors for my foreground, I'm just building up types of patterns that I could build off of later. Redefining some of the tree shapes, I'll go back in and just refine some of them, make them a little bit more detailed, of something I could always go back and change with a mask or even erase it if I want a permanent change. Now putting in a little pool of water, I masked off that area and left the water on its own layer so I could completely go back to the way it was if I'm not happy with the water. Let's take a look and see what we have. Okay, let's take a look and see what we have here. Now what I'm doing is I blocked out, using a mask on the grass layer, just an area to create that little pool of water. Now what I did was I used a mask over here to block that out, but then I put a layer above it so I could paint on a mask if it's a layer above. So in other words, if I decide I don't want that water there, then if I turn this off and disable the mask, then my grass is back the way it was. So in other words, this is just a suggestion if you want to try and experiment with an object or some different changes in your painting as you go, no matter what you're doing, then this is just an option to make a change, but not a permanent one. We're going to turn that back on, and then we're going to turn that back on, and there's our water. Now with the water, it actually kind of looks concave because I put put the reflections in that I have to make the muddy banks yet first. But what I have to do first is I want to create my dead trees in here. We're going to put a couple in real time, dead pine trees especially. They'll have some character to them. But I want to make sure this area is completely done right in here, that anything that would be reflecting in our pool. So once it's done, then I'm going to take a little section out of it, flop it over, and then put it down in the water. Now, in this particular case, that's fairly safe to do, only because I'm standing in a flat field looking at this landscape. And so what I would see is at the exact angle that I'm coming into the water, that it would be going out. That is just something I go over in some of my photography demos, and that is important because let me show you. In this particular photo, I was pretty much sitting on the bank of the water, eye level to the bird. So in this particular case, this would be a safe bird to just take it and flop it over and make a reliable reflection for it, especially even since my reflection is cut off. I would be able to then just take the entire bird and complete that reflection if I wanted to or needed to in a painting. But now in this one though, it's not the same. This one, look at the bird as to what you see in the bird. The head is completely covered by the wing, but in the reflection, you could see the entire face and then some of the beak and head of the bird. For that reason, the reflection is definitely not the same as the bird itself. Now, the reason why is because I was 6 to 8 feet up on an embankment photographing down. Now, because you could see more of the top of the bird, then the perspective has to go with the reflection. So for that reason, what I'm getting at is depending on what kind of reflection you put in, you are going to be making a determination where the viewer is going to be. For me, that's important. Now, in all that said, those two photos helped me quite a bit, only because I photographed both of them and I knew where I was when I took the picture. So that helps me out a lot when I use them as reference. Now for us, we're going to put in our dead trees next. Right in here, I think, would be a nice, good one. And then it'll be a nice, strong reflection in our pool. And then maybe we'll put a couple other dead ones in just to support the reflection. And we got a long ways to go. This black area right in here, I don't know if I'm going to keep it or not. I might even just take it out. I was going to put some lighter colored trunks in it just to be the opposite of dark colored trunks of trees. But I don't know if I want to do that. But this is digital. We could change anything along the way. Let's put in our dead trees. Okay, let's take a look and see how we can make our dead tree. Now the first thing we want to do is put our dead trees on their own layer. And I'll show you why here in a minute. This will be for a couple of different reasons. Now, I'm going to grab my other brush and we're going to turn off the diffusion. We don't want any paint movement yet, but we're going to have a lot of water in with the paint. So there are going to be a lot of things happening as soon as we turn on the diffusion. I'm going to zoom in so we can see what we're doing here. And then I'm going to, we'll leave it at 6. And we'll go with the burnt umber just to start off with. And like maybe right in here, this guy right here, we'll make the trunk on an angle. I'm not too worried about it being too sketchy or anything now because there's going to be a lot of things changing once we start letting the water do its thing. I'm just going to put in the trunk first. And since this tree here is closer to this tree, it could be a little bit taller. And then we are going to put that, make this area just a little bit heavier. And then it can be broken up like this little break right in here. Doesn't have to be completely spelled out. We are going to put in some branches. That don't look too bad there. Now it looks like a pretty much a plain Jane kind of tree right now. Things are going to change quite a bit here. Now first we're going to put the transparent lock on. And then I'm going to take any kind of texture brush. My good old sharp splash will do. And we're going to go back to burnt sienna. and we have a lot of water in it. I'm going to turn down the opacity just a little bit. I'm going to go back over just the tree, and then a little bit of cobalt blue. This will grade up a little bit. Now, this is going to happen quick, so have your finger ready on the fast dry button. What I'm going to do is take the tilt over to the right, and now this is providing my light. The majority of my light is coming from my left. So I'm going to have the tilt going to the right, and then we're going to turn off the diffusion. In other words, put the diffusion on, and it's going to happen quick. That's it. Now I've got a nice highlighted tree on the left-hand side and a nice shadow on the right-hand side, and all the colors mixed. But now what we have to do next is get rid of the background so none of those textures come through our tree and make our transparent tree look like it's not a solid object. Let's do that next. Okay, let's complete our tree. And what we need to do is get rid of the confusing background patterns that are behind the tree. And what I mean by that is, if we look, all the tree shrubs and different things that are in that small tree line will be coming through our tree. And if it's on the shadowed side, it's not so bad because the texture will blend in. But like, say for example, this right here, what it'll do is it'll clean up our highlighted side. And what we need to do for that is, first we need to go to the clouds, and we will put a mask there, and then go down to our layer 6, because that is this down in here. If I turn that off, that's all the shrubs. We'll put a layer mask there. And then we need to go back to the dead tree layer. And all I have to do is hit my magic wand. I have it set at 1, low as it could go, no contiguous. And then I could click anywhere but the tree, and I will select that transparent alpha area that is not the tree. Now, this would only allow me to work in that alpha area, so I only want to work in the tree area. So all I have to do is go up and invert the selection, and now I'll be only working on the tree area. Now, the first thing we'll do is go up to our clouds mask, grab my black, here it is, and then we could just use that brush right there. And then if I start blackening out this, what I should be left with, if I turn off the tree layer itself, I should have nothing but a white ghost shape of where the tree was. And then that will mean that I got rid of all the pattern behind the tree. Now that I'm getting down into the brush and the trees, I'm going to go to this layer mask. And now you can see it's starting to whiten up in some places. And we can always add more color back to the tree, because then all I have to do is go back to that particular layer, the tree layer, and hit the transparent lock, and I'll only be working on the tree itself. But you could see how when I let the tilt go straight to the right and let all those colors mix that I put in, I got some really nice, interesting textures. That it could be old weathered bark or what have you, and you can clean this up or detail it as much as you want now that you have a good pattern to start with. Okay, then now if I turn that off, that is our tree and only our tree. So if I take it back down, that's not too bad. There's our tree a little bit close up. Now that you know what we'll be doing and how to do it, I'm going to drop some of these dead trees in and other regular deciduous trees in here and there the same way. I can put them on different layers, I can put them on the same layer, but I just have to make sure this tree is completely dry. So if I actually have any kind of movement at all, I don't want this tree to change while I'm working on other trees. Let's go ahead and drop in some more trees. We'll do that a speed painting way. I decided to go ahead and cover up that dark spot I just painted over it. Now placing the trees where I want them, I drop back every now and then just to see where I'd like to place the next tree. Keeping several things in mind. Number one, composition. Even though it's digital and I can move them around, I still like to try and get my placement correct the first time. I'll go back in and add the thin, dark black branches at the very end just to add more complexity and detail. Now I'm putting in a dead tree and the grass. It's important to note that even though that white grass is the paper, I still have to make it look like an opaque object and paint around it with my dead tree. Putting in my dark branches just to add complexity, I'm just going back and forth to see what could be darker and what could be lighter. Adding more texture to the fallen tree and its branches, I'm now ready to drop in my reflection. Keep in mind that reflections are usually twice as dark as the object itself. That's because the water absorbs light. Let's see what we have. Okay, let's take a look and see what we have. I just finished up the trees, everything else, put in some of the grass. If I don't like some of the grass, I could do one of two things, if not both. Go back in with I'm going to take off the transparent lock, and then what I will do is apply a mask, and then I can even go back in and just lighten up some of this. And just to mix it up, I'll take the opacity up. Keep in mind, I have a couple other demos where I even use colors. That way, if you use a specific color with a mask, you can't go any darker than that, even if it's 100%. And that works pretty good in some situations. But now this, I'll just use black. And then I'm going to just go back over some of these and take out some of the grass. And then it'll add a little bit of texture to it. And then I can even go back over again on a layer above and add grass in front of this. But what it'll do is add again a little bit more complexity and more importantly layers, so everything doesn't look flat. Okay, then now what I'll do is go back in. We're going to add a layer above that. And then I'm going to put some grasses here and there and even maybe some up in here just to mix it up a little bit so it's not only just around the water. I want to mix them up a little bit, and then the rest would be just low grass and then just these big clumps here and there. What I'll do is I want to mix it up, so I'll get a different brush. I'll go with this one, and then I'm going to cut back the opacity because we're going to do some out in the distance. Just a couple small ones here and there. Make it a little bit bigger. And again, I have them staggered as I paint. So if I don't like the angle or the size, I'm not above undoing it and trying again. These are getting a little bit too dark and opaque. I'm going to take them up a little bit too, just to give a hint. And I'll put some in front of these. Let's try burnt sienna. There we go. That'll add a little bit of complexity. A little bit too dark. Just to give a hint. And what I can also do then is put the transparent lock back on this and darken the bottoms just to make it look where the grass comes into a clump. It's going to be darker there. But right now, it's not too bad as far as just grasses scattered here and there. This is a very loose painting for me. And then also just a rendering of grasses and what have you. So for me, this is a spontaneous painting that I would pretty much call complete at this point. I could take any of the layers and duplicate them over, make the sky darker, do different things, but that's all going to be an option of the artist and or you of how you want to create your subject matter and style. But it gives you the options to immediately darken something, and then you can even take that second layer and lighten it up with the opacity of that layer. So if instead of having it twice as dark, maybe you might only want it 1.5 as dark. Now, with all that in mind, I think we could call this one finished. So until I see you out in the field or back at the studio, thanks for watching.